we're here now, but the mini house that's being built there. I saw that as well, and I think we need some more questioning into that as well.
And just like that, a legal battle with the village of Johnstown that would last for several months began with the casual mention of we need to look further at this tiny house. In December of 2020, I sent an email to our village zoning inspector asking to make sure that I was not missing any ordinances that would prevent me from building my tiny house at my current residence. I wasn't asking for permission, but they seemed to take it that way, and he responded that he would allow me to build the trailer in my driveway. The conversation about my tiny house build continued in a very negative manner for about 30 minutes before they moved on to other topics. And during that time, they said things like, if you give me a reason to stop him, I absolutely will. And that they would try to impose inspections on the property. So the next morning, I sent this email over to the zoning inspector to get some clarifications for how we were going to go forward. And sure enough, at the very next meeting, one of my neighbors was there.
Go ahead. Just into the podium there.
I'm not sure what's on the agenda or what's not on the agenda, but my name is Jerry Pulley, 11 Lewis Drive, Johnstown. And what I'm calling about, I got wind of the fact that my neighbor is going to be issued some kind of a permit allowance or something to let him construct a mini home in his driveway, I assume. And I just wanted to know, I guess it hasn't been issued yet, it might have been issued yet, but my concern is why and how was this being allowed? I look up at these zoning laws and they all, say residential is residential and nothing should be non-residential with, this is the practice and intent of the law to let him do it. There's nothing in the law about construction, something on a mini home in your driveway. And so I look at all the ordinances that apply to home occupancy rules and this and that, and there's nothing in there that allows this to happen. My concern is basically, why is it?
So they continued to talk about me and our tiny house build for about 40 minutes before they decided that they were going to table it so that they could do some more research on ways to put a stop to it. The next morning, I gave the village a call and asked what was being done, and was told that it was being discussed with legal counsel and that they would get back to me as soon as they could. And a few days later, this was the email that I received. It basically just says that the village council and zoning commission do not have the ability to put a stop to the tiny house. However, since it was a decision made by the village zoning inspector, it could be appealed by the complaining neighbor. And they had until January 26th to do that. January 26th went right by, and I didn't hear anything from the village, so I assumed all was well. Knowing the city of Johnstown, I attended the next meeting, and just casually thrown in right about the 15-minute mark, I heard this.
We have an official appeal hearing at the February 9th meeting, and we have many applications scheduled for the February 23rd meeting, which is going to take some time. So I'm not sure how many more things we can fit on the agenda for those two meetings, but we'll take a look.
That night, as soon as I got home, I sent an email to Bailey, the village planner, and asked her why I was not notified, and when the appeal was filed by Jerry, when I was going to be notified, when I would be given the reason for the appeal, and why it took so long to schedule the meeting when she had said that it had to be within 5 days of notification. And she responded early the next morning that Jerry had filed the appeal on January 22nd, and that she was working with the attorney to make sure that all of the processes were followed correctly since so many errors had been made. The appeal was scheduled for February 9th, and she walked me briefly through the process of how it was going to go down and why it was not within the 5-day time lane. I asked for a copy of the appeal, and Bailey sent over the appeal as written by Jerry, which stated that I would be building on a 50-foot trailer, that it would take a year to build, and that it shouldn't be able to build on my property because it's a residential area, and no construction should be able to be done in a residential area. So the meeting was scheduled for February 9th, and the way that I was told the meeting was going to run was that we would both be sworn in as if we were in a court hearing, and then the village zoning inspector would give a rundown of why he made his decision. Then Jerry would have an opportunity to present his case for his appeal, and then I would have an opportunity to present my case for why I think the appeal was invalid. The zoning inspector gave his rundown, which was essentially there was nothing in the zoning code that would allow him to block me from building in my driveway. And then it was Jerry's turn to present his case.
It came to my attention that this was going on. I know I'm not supposed to talk about previous things and all this stuff, but there's been a thing going on last year where, things happened and I said nothing. Other people said something and John's been allowed, and I know he's just trying to make a buck and everything else.
If we can stick to this situation.
Well, this situation is, I don't know where in the zoning code, you take the approach, Jim seems to take the approach, if it isn't prohibited, it's allowed. My contention is if it isn't allowed, it's not permitted. So you go into a residential area and somebody wants to come in there and put a trailer in their driveway, then build a house on it, then somehow, I guess, take it somewhere, I'm not sure where. And this is all going to be done with a handshake as far as I can see, because I don't know what zoning you're approving this under, because there's no zoning that applies to it, Jim was saying. So if there's none that applies to it, how can you apply anything to it? Do you know what I'm saying? What's going to enforce this if he doesn't get it done within a year? Who's going to establish a beginning date? Is the beginning date when the trailer comes on the scene? Is it beginning date when he starts putting something on the trailer? And if he doesn't adhere to the conditions that Jim puts on, what happens then? Does it just stay there? I'm not even sure if this item he's going to build will be allowed to be put on public roads to get out of there. So if it doesn't ever get out of there, then what happens? That's my concern. And then I look out my front window at his side yard, even though he's on Westview Drive, it's his side yard that faces me. What's precluded me from sitting there the rest of my life looking at a trailer sitting there because he doesn't have the approval or permits and stuff to move it out of there?
So Jerry talked for about 25 more minutes, saying the same thing, that if it's not talked about in the zoning code, then it shouldn't be permitted. And then it was finally my turn.
Before I get into addressing the appeal, I just wanted to start. There's been this has been talked about at 4 or 5 different zoning meetings. So I do want to correct a few incorrect statements that have been made by various members of the public and the committee. In the appeal, the trailer is listed as a 50-foot trailer. The trailer is a 24-foot gooseneck trailer. It has also been stated that we own land elsewhere that we will be moving the tiny house to. That is not the case. We are looking to temporarily move to an RV park until our home can be brought up to selling worthy, which should take a very short period of time, and then listed and sold so that we can travel. This will never be lived in at 6 Westview Drive. It's like, as I said, it's going to be moved to an RV park that would be treated exactly like a month-long or several month-long RV parked in the RV park. The question of parking has been brought up several times by the appellant. we do have enough space in our driveway for the trailer, plenty of build room, and all 3 of our vehicles. My plan is to not take up any additional street parking unless I'm raising a wall or something that takes up a large portion of it at that exact time. This is not something that I'm looking to have a lot of street parking affected. We're on very good terms with the neighbors in the apartments next to us, who there's several of them, and they rely on that street parking. So just as a courtesy, we have no plans on taking that street parking on a long-term basis. So I have been researching tiny houses for several years now, and the wife and I, just through quite a bit of conversation, have decided that that is the life that we want to do. Quite a bit over the last several years, I've volunteered for Habitat for Humanity, so I got a lot of experience building houses and found that it's something that I really enjoyed. So we decided that it would be an undertaking to start our new life with something that we built personally. This isn't something that we just thought of this winter and decided to go for. It's something that we've put a lot of thought into, and we're ready to do it. I mean, we've been selling off our items, and this is not something that is going to be a drawn out process. Once we have built the project on the trailer and moved it to an RV park, we plan to do repairs and then traveling the US inside of that trailer. I use the word trailer instead of tiny house because the complete project from beginning to end, the legal definition of that is a trailer. According to Johnstown Ordinance 301.48, a trailer is any vehicle designed or used for carrying persons or property wholly on its own structure and for being drawn by a motor vehicle, which mirrors the ORC. The legal road limits are 102 inches wide and less than 40 feet long. The question has been asked, how big will it be? We're aiming right about 13 foot with a 6-inch leeway to make sure that we can get in under that number and get it completely 100% road legal so that we can do our dream of traveling. This means that all of the requirements for the project on the trailer will be within the definition of a trailer, no matter what's affixed to the top of the trailer. Therefore, the regulation that applies to the situation is Ordinance 1175.11, which I originally reached out to Mr. Blair when I originally brought it to his attention, which states which is the parking of trailers and recreational vehicles on residential property. The ordinance covers the following areas. Section A, said parking shall be at the residence on the driveway, side, or rear yards, which is clearly the item in question here. The trailer or recreational vehicle shall be at least 11 feet from the face of the curb. It's a 24-foot trailer on a little over a 40-foot driveway, so that does not present any issue. No part of the trailer or recreational vehicle shall extend over the public sidewalk. Again, it's very set back from that. I did a measurement and there is more than enough room in the driveway. There was some talk, and Jim, some of the items that he brought in were items that were applied to a commercial trailer. I just wanted to clarify that this is not a commercial trailer. A commercial trailer in Ohio is defined as a vehicle without motive power designed for carrying commercial property and for being drawn by a motor vehicle. Therefore, it does not fall into the commercial property. According to the definitions that were written, voted on, and approved by the Johnstown Village Council and Zoning Commission, that means that this project is a simple trailer improvement. There would be no different than a trailer up the street from me doing repairs on it in between seasons. Someone adding taller sides to the trailer, or even building a trailer on their own on an axle. All of these projects are personal improvements to a legally defined trailer, and this does not vary from those projects. So now I'll go into the appeal. The appellant has stated that this is not the intended use of a residential zoned area and is not permitted by 1141.01 of the zoning code. After consulting an attorney, I was informed that the term land use in this context means the use of the land is further defined by zoning ordinances. As stated previously, the land use defined by the zoning ordinance provides a clear picture that this is not permitted in a residential area. If a person bought a trailer in their driveway and stripped the rust off of it and then repainted it, that would be an acceptable use. If a person parked an RV in their driveway, tore out the inside of that RV and completely redid all of the items in that RV, that would be a permitted reason for that project. Jim has also stated that if I wanted to build a shed in the driveway and then move it to a permanent location somewhere else on the property, that wouldn't be an issue until the shed permit for the final location was approved. Would all of those things be acceptable in a residential zoning area? They would and are on a regular basis. And if you really think about it, the trailer improvement that I'm going for, it's essentially all of those items, one after another. My whole goal was to be reasonable for the entire process by reaching out to the zoning commissioner, making sure that I was working within the rules. Agreeing to limitations that, even though not required by the zoning commission, seemed very clearly to be just decent human being things to do. So I have no issue with those. Things such as the contractor hours of 7 to 6. I would like to state that I'm going to take that a step further, because I would not want somebody hammering at 7 o'clock in the morning. I know they showed up to do my roof at 8, and I wasn't a fan of that. So I would say that those hours are actually 9 to 6. And I would happily send that to you, Jim, if that would make the committee happy. I've agreed to keep my property clean. I plan to use my garage, which has a closing garage door, to store the goods, because the idea, as was stated, is to keep those items dry. As for a tarp, they make tiny house tarps that are gigantic tarps that are designed to cover projects that need to be dried in. I mean, garages get built and they need to be covered at the same thing. So we're looking at a extremely large tarp. None of those items were required, but as if the person next door to me were to start working on a project of this size, I would ask that they did that same thing. So part 2 of the appeal states, to allow this would reduce the value of my property and the area in general, also setting a precedence for the other residential properties. I reached out to the Licking County Appraiser's Office and spoke to Doug, one of the appraisers of Licking County. He stated that he had never heard of a temporary project that returned the property to its original state, impacting a property value. I would also state that for this to be an aspect of the monetary value of a property, that the appellant would need to be selling within 1 year. If that was the case, then I would even be open to holding off on the project to allow them to sell the property. Market in Johnstown's very hot right now, so I can't imagine that it would take a huge amount of time. However, the appellants lived at the same address for over 55 years, so I don't think that seems likely. I would also argue that the appellant has an issue with a temporary trailer project. Then the same mindset would go into the Westview beautification project, which has closed down for the winter and left cones and piles of dirt and caution tape just blowing in the wind. It would be roughly the same look, where something at the end, things are going to be returned to their original, in this case, slightly improved condition. And part 3 of the appeal said, this action is unique to me as it is directly across the street, and thus no one else outside the area would suffer directly unless it would happen to them. However, if it did, I'm sure most would be unhappy. And that actually isn't true either. The view the appellant shares would be shared by about 3 other properties from the way my driveway is set up in opposing properties. One of these views is held by Doug Cook at 25 Westview Drive. And at the January 12th meeting, the minutes state that Doug says his only concern was that this was going to be an ongoing process that would continue after the first one, and was made to establish the village statement. The Village of Johnstown is dedicated to providing a secure community environment that fosters cultural, recreational, educational, and economic opportunities while preserving our unique historical character precedent. And this would be an ongoing manufacturing site. This would be my only objection. It's never our intention and will not be where we build more than one. We are looking at this to be our home. So therefore, Doug has already stated on record that he would have no objection. Furthermore, in this month's zoning report, there was a call from someone that was worried about someone living in a tiny house at my property. She was informed that no one would be living in it, and it would be built here and then moved off site. Once she was informed of that, she stated that she would have no issue with that as long as no one lived in it. There's no name applied to that person, but she must live close enough that she thought that a person living in it would affect them personally. I've also had a conversation with one of the renters next door, and while being a renter, they have stated they wouldn't have any issue as long as we didn't take their parking. The other properties that share the same view had the opportunity to file an appeal to this decision as well and chose not to. So while that may not show as an approval of the build, it does show that they do not have an active issue with the project. I know that that was a lot. I do apologize. In closing, I just want to thank you guys. I know that this has taken a lot of time. And I just ask that you remember, I'm not trying to be unreasonable. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm within the rights and that we are able to obtain our dream. I followed all of the legal paths as well as tried to be as courteous as possible and continue to make concessions. But this is a dream that we've had for a long time. I can assure the council that I plan to continue to be a reasonable neighbor, and I welcome anyone to stop by in a personal setting and check out the tiny home. I know they're different, and they're kind of something that people are interested in, maybe not to live in, but as almost a point of interest. So I welcome anyone to stop by as the build's going on. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it, and who doesn't love seeing a dream come true?
So there was some back and forth after my monologue, including when one of the zoning commission members started trying to include an item that was not pertinent to this case, and I got to object, and the lawyer said that they were not able to discuss it at this time. So the meeting wrapped up, and I was told that the council would have 45 days from the meeting to issue a response, and I immediately knew that it would take the entire 45 days, whether they knew how they were voting or not. And sure enough, 42 days later, I got this email. I attended the meeting the following night, and here was the council's decision.
So, and we're going to have to dismiss this due to lack of jurisdiction and a failure to enforce on this. So that's our opinion on this. And we'll go ahead and put this to a vote. I'll make a motion to approve as written.
So after about a 4-month battle with the village and the neighbors, we did finally get permission to order and build the trailer in our driveway. So we ordered the trailer, had it custom built by tinyhomebuilders.com, and delivered right to our driveway from Florida. And so now we get started. I know that was a pretty long video. I do apologize, but I wanted to hit the high points since it was kind of a big deal. But now we're going to get into the building. So if you guys want to follow along, make sure to click the subscribe button, and you'll get notifications anytime we put out a new video. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope to see you guys around.